The photograph had been on my mother's refrigerator for 11 years. A picture of my sister Danielle and me at the Grand Canyon, both of us sunburned and squinting into the light, her arm thrown around my shoulders like she meant it. I used to walk past that photo every time I visited and feel something warm about it. The last time I was in my mother's kitchen, I noticed it was gone. A magnet shaped like a sunflower had been moved to cover the empty space. I didn't say anything. I had been not saying things for a very long time. My son Eli was 8 years old and had been talking about my father's 60th birthday party for 3 weeks straight. Not because he was particularly invested in milestone birthdays as a concept, but because my father had made him a promise. A real one, the kind my father delivered with a handshake like a contract. He had told Eli that at the party, in front of everyone, Eli was going to help him cut the cake. That was it. That was the whole promise. But if you had seen my son's face when my father made it, you would understand why it mattered. Eli had asked me 4 separate times whether he should wear his navy button-down or his gray one. He had decided on the navy. He had laid it out on his chair the night before, like he was preparing for something important, which in the logic of an 8-year-old, he was. My husband Daniel had been quieter than usual on the drive over. He had this way of going still when he was thinking hard about something. Not distant, just very present inside himself. I had learned to read the difference after 6 years of marriage. This was the careful kind of quiet, the kind that meant he was paying attention. We were 20 minutes from my parents' house when my phone buzzed on the center console. A text from my mother. I picked it up at a red light. Hey, slight change of plans for tonight. Can you call me when you get a chance? Before you arrive, if possible. I called immediately. She didn't answer. I tried again. Nothing. Daniel glanced at the phone in my hand. Everything okay? I don't know, I said. Probably. We pulled into my parents' driveway 15 minutes later. The house looked exactly the way it always did for a gathering: my mother's car, my aunt's minivan, 2 other cars I recognized from the neighborhood. Through the front window, I could see the warm glow of the dining room lights, the suggestion of people moving around inside. Eli was already unbuckling himself before Daniel had the car in park. He had been doing that since he was 6, and I had given up correcting it. He pushed the door open and was halfway up the front walk before I had both feet on the ground. The door opened before he could knock. My sister Danielle stood in the doorway, and she had that look on her face. The one I had been seeing for most of my adult life and had never quite found the right name for. It lived somewhere between condescension and something that wanted very much to appear like warmth. "Oh," she said. "You're already here. Not hi, not come in. Just, you're already here, the way you might say it about a package you hadn't expected yet." Eli looked up at her with complete openness. "Is Grandpa inside?" "We're cutting the cake together." Something moved across Danielle's face. She looked down at him, and her expression rearranged itself into something softer, deliberately softer, the kind of soft that has structure underneath it. "Hey, buddy," she said. "Your mom and I need to talk about something really quick, okay? Can you go around back with your dad? I think Grandpa set up the cornhole boards." Eli looked at Daniel, who looked at me. I gave him the smallest nod. He took Eli's hand and they disappeared around the side of the house, and Danielle stepped out onto the front porch and pulled the door almost shut behind her. "So," she said. She crossed her arms, and I noticed she was wearing the blouse I had complimented 2 Christmases ago. I did not know why I noticed that. I noticed everything in moments like this, every irrelevant detail, because the relevant details were too heavy to look at directly. I'm just going to say it because I think you'd rather I be up front. She did not look like someone being up front. She looked like someone who had rehearsed. "We've restructured the program for tonight a little bit. Dad's going to have a more formal speech portion, and we wanted it to just be really streamlined. And so we're only having like the immediate family speak, and I'm organizing it, so..." "Okay," I said. "What does that have to do with Eli cutting the cake?" She exhaled. "We thought it would be cleaner to just have Dad do the cake cutting with Mom. It's their moment, you know? And having a kid up there might make it feel a little," she paused, chaotic. I stood very still. "Dad promised him," I said. "I know, and Dad sometimes over-promises. You know how he is. And I just thought it was better to set expectations now rather than have it be awkward in the middle of the party." I had a very specific memory right then. I was 19, sitting in my childhood bedroom, filling out financial aid paperwork for my 2nd year of college while downstairs. My parents threw Danielle a going-away party for the gap year they had funded. I had heard the laughter coming up through the floor, and I had kept filling out the forms. I got very good at filling out forms. I got very good at a lot of things that required doing quietly and without acknowledgement. "Is there a careful we couldn't have called me before Eli put on his Navy shirt?" I said. "I'm telling you now, aren't I? You're telling me in the driveway? Yes." "Rebecca." Her voice went to the place it always went when she wanted to signal that I was being unreasonable. Tonight is about Dad. And honestly, you have this way of making things tense without even meaning to. And I just thought, for one night, can we all just keep it together? I said. Not cause problems? Be grateful we were invited? She blinked. I wasn't going to say that. No, I said. You never say it. You just arrange things so it gets said for you. She stared at me. I had not said something that direct to her in years. Maybe ever. I'm going to go find my husband and my son, I said, and we'll figure out tonight. I walked around the side of the house without waiting for her response. Daniel was in the backyard, crouched next to Eli at the cornhole boards. My father was there too, sleeves rolled up, looking exactly 60 in the best way, which meant he still moved like he had places to be. He saw my face and straightened. Hey, sweetheart. He read me the way parents read their children, fast and below the surface. Everything okay? I'll tell you later, I said. Happy almost birthday, Dad. He held my face in his hands for a moment like I was something worth holding, and then pulled me into a hug. I breathed into his shoulder. He smelled like cedar, and the same aftershave he had used my entire life. You look tired? He said quietly. I'm fine. He made a sound that meant he didn't entirely believe me but would let me have it for now. We went inside. The house was full of the particular noise of a family party overlapping conversations. My uncle's laugh that took up too much room, the sound of ice cubes in glasses, my mother's voice rising above everything to ask if anyone wanted more of the spinach dip. I moved through it with the practiced ease of someone who had been performing fine at family gatherings for a long time. I was good at it. I had been told, more than once, that I was so easy, so low maintenance, so good at rolling with things. I had never been sure if it was a compliment. Eli stayed close to my father all evening, which was their pattern whenever they were in the same room. My father had a gift for giving children his complete attention in a way most adults couldn't manage or couldn't be bothered to. He crouched to Eli's level. He listened to the full story, no matter how long it took to get to the point. I watched them from across the room, Eli gesturing about something with enormous conviction, my father nodding with that expression that meant he was genuinely interested, and I felt something move through me that wasn't quite sadness but lived near it. Dinner happened. The table was crowded and warm, and someone had made my father's favorite, the brisket my mother did, only on occasions that mattered. I sat between Daniel and my aunt, and I ate and answered questions and participated and did not look at Danielle more than I had to. After dinner came the part of the evening I had been dreading without fully naming it. Danielle stood up from her chair at the head of the table, which was already a choice, since that was traditionally where my father sat, and she tapped her glass. Okay, everyone. So I thought it would be really special to do a little program for Dad tonight. She had printed an agenda. I watched her pull it out, and I had the strange feeling of watching someone execute a plan they had been running quietly for a long time. We're going to do some toasts, and I've asked a few people to say a couple words. Uncle Brian, Dad's college friend Martine, and myself. And then we'll do the cake. The table settled. People pulled their chairs in a little. Eli looked at me from across the table and mouthed the cake, with eyebrows raised in the hopeful language of 8-year-olds. And I gave him the small smile I had, the one that meant I see you and I don't have an answer yet. Uncle Brian stood. He was funny and warm and told a story about my father in 1987 that involved a Ford Bronco and a very misguided camping trip, and the table laughed in the way that means everyone is genuinely having a good time. Martine stood and said something so sincere about 40 years of friendship that my mother reached for a napkin. Good moments. Real ones. Then Danielle stood. She was a good speaker. I want to be fair about that. She had poise and she knew how to use a pause. She talked about my father's dedication, his patience, the way he had always made her feel like she could do anything. She mentioned the time he drove 4 hours in a snowstorm to help her move apartments, the time he sat with her on the phone at midnight when a job fell through. Specific memories. Well chosen. She did not mention me once. That would not have been remarkable by itself. A speech doesn't have to mention everyone, but what she said at the end was this. Dad, you have always made me feel like I was exactly who you wanted me to be. And I hope you know that everything I do, all of it, is because of the way you raised me. You're not just my father. You're my example. And then she looked around the table with a certain expression that was hard to describe unless you knew her. An expression that said she was waiting for the room to confirm what she had just said about herself. And the room did, because rooms do. My father started to stand, to say something in response, but Danielle was already moving toward the kitchen. Okay, cake time. Mom, can you bring it out? I'll get the lighter. I looked at Eli. He had his hands folded on the table and was watching Danielle with an expression I recognized. It was the expression he got when something didn't match his expectations, and he was trying to figure out if it was going to be okay. "Mom," he said quietly, "I thought I was doing the cake." "I know, Bug." I reached across and covered his folded hands with mine. "I know. Did I do something wrong?" The breath went out of me. "No," I said. "You did absolutely nothing wrong. This is not about you. Not even a little bit." He nodded in the way children nod when they're accepting an explanation they don't fully have the equipment to process yet. He looked back at the kitchen doorway. "Okay," he said. Just that. Daniel's hand found my knee under the table. He didn't say anything. He was the only person in the world who could locate exactly the right gesture at exactly the right moment without ever making it about himself. The cake came out. It was beautiful, 3 tiers, buttercream, the little fondant details that had clearly taken someone time. My mother said it in front of my father, and everyone sang, and Eli sang too, his voice clear and a little off-key in the way that makes singing better. My father blew out the candles. The room applauded. And then my father didn't pick up the cake knife. He looked around the table. His eyes found Eli. "Come here," he said. Eli looked at me. I nodded. He climbed off his chair and went around to where my father was sitting. And my father pulled him in close and put the cake knife in Eli's hand and wrapped his own hand over it. "I made a promise," my father said. And he said it at full volume, not for the table exactly, but not away from it either. A man keeps his promises. Even if someone else forgot. He said someone else. He didn't say who. He didn't have to. The table knew. I watched my mother look at Danielle, and I watched Danielle look at the table. They cut the cake together, my father's big hand and my son's small one. And Eli's face in that moment was the most uncomplicated thing I had seen all evening. Just pure. Just happy. I kept it together for exactly as long as that took. After the cake was cut and distributed and the table broke into smaller conversations again, my father caught my eye and tilted his head slightly toward the hallway. I followed him through the kitchen and out the back door onto the deck. The night air was cool and smelled like cut grass. The party sounds were muffled through the door behind us. He leaned against the railing and looked at me for a long moment. "She called me last week," he said. "Danielle. To tell me she was reorganizing the evening because she wanted it to feel curated." He said the word like it tasted strange. I told her that was fine. I didn't ask what she was changing. "Dad, you don't have to." "I found out this afternoon." He said it steadily, without performance. "I found out that she had called your mother and told her to let you know the cake thing was being cut and that she just needed to handle it before you arrived. Your mother mentioned it as a footnote while I was helping with the brisket." I said nothing. "I've been letting things be footnotes for too long," he said. The sounds from inside drifted out. Laughter. My uncle's voice. Eli saying something that made Daniel respond with that low, warm sound that was almost a laugh. "Your sister has a story," my father said, "about this family. A story she has been telling for a long time, and in that story, she is the one who loves the hardest and sacrifices the most and holds everything together. And I have let her tell that story because it was easier than asking her to look at a different one." "Dad." I'm finishing. He wasn't sharp about it, just clear. "You have been standing on the outside of this family's attention for most of your adult life and doing it without complaint. I told myself that meant you were okay with it. I think I needed that to be true, because if it wasn't, then I had been failing you for a long time, and I wasn't ready to look at that." He paused. "I'm looking at it now." My eyes were doing the thing they did when I had been holding something too long. I didn't try to stop it. "There are some things I want to correct," he said, formally. "Your grandfather's watch, the one I've been keeping in the study, I told your mother years ago it would go to Danielle because she asked for it when he passed. I'm changing that. It should go to you, and I should have said that then." He looked at me directly. "And there are some financial things I've been structuring that I let your mother and Danielle have too much input on. I'm meeting with my attorney next week to go through them." "Dad, you don't have to do any of this tonight. The speech your sister gave," he said. "She said everything I did was because of how I raised her." He was quiet for a moment. "I've been thinking about that. And the honest answer is that she's right, but not the way she meant it. I am responsible for what she became, at least in part, because I made it easy. Because I let your mother run the interference and I stayed out of it. Because I told myself it was a parenting style and not a pattern with a cost." He looked at me. "The cost was you. And Eli. And I'm not going to keep pretending I don't know that. I had promised myself on the drive over that I would be fine tonight. I was very good at being fine. I had a decade and a half of practice. I was not fine. I wasn't falling apart either. I wasn't making a scene. I was just standing on my father's back deck at 9 o'clock at night with tears I had apparently been saving for exactly this moment, This specific combination of being seen and being apologized to by the one person whose apology had always mattered most. "Thank you," I said. It was all I had. He opened his arms and I stepped into them the way I hadn't since I was very young, without calculation, without bracing myself, without managing how much space I took up. He held me the way fathers are supposed to hold their daughters and mostly don't, not because they don't love them, but because no one ever tells them how much it matters. We stood there for a moment. Inside, I could hear Eli's voice rising above everything, mid-story, working toward a punchline. I pulled back and looked at my father's face. He looked 60 in a way that meant he had earned it. "Does Danielle know?" I asked. "About the watch? The attorney?" "She'll know when it's appropriate for her to know," he said. "Tonight, I just needed you to know." We went back inside. Danielle was at the kitchen counter talking to my aunt, her back to the room, and when she turned and saw my face, she went quiet in a way I had never seen from her. She was very good at reading rooms. She read this one. She looked at our father. He met her eyes with an expression that was entirely calm and entirely immovable, the expression of someone who had made a decision and was no longer interested in relitigating it. She looked back at me. Something moved through her expression that I had no name for. It wasn't guilt exactly, and it wasn't anger exactly. It was something more complicated than both, something that looked almost like the beginning of a question she didn't know how to ask. She turned back to my aunt. The conversation resumed. I found Daniel in the living room where he had apparently gotten deeply involved in a discussion with my uncle about the merits of cast iron versus stainless steel cookware. He saw me and extracted himself with the smooth competence of someone who has spent 6 years learning when to move quickly. "Okay?" he asked. "Yes," I said. And then, actually yes. Not in the way I usually mean it. He looked at me for a moment. Really looked. "Good," he said, and he put his arm around me and that was enough. Eli found us 20 minutes later with cake on his chin and enormous satisfaction in his bearing. "I cut it," he said. "Did you see?" "I cut the cake." "I saw," I said. Grandpa held my hand, but I did most of it. I could tell. "It was a lot of layers," he said seriously. "You have to go straight down," Grandpa told me. "Good technique," Daniel said. Eli nodded, accepting this. Then he noticed my expression, the way children notice things that adults have decided not to mention. He looked at me for a moment, with those eyes that picked up more than they should. "Are you okay, Mom?" "I'm really good, actually," I said. He studied me. "You look like you were crying." I was. Happy crying. He considered this. "I don't totally get happy crying," he said. "But okay." He looked around the room. "Can we go get ice cream after?" Grandpa said the cake was enough dessert, but I feel like there is room for more dessert. "There is absolutely room for more dessert," I said. He moved off toward my father with the confidence of someone whose evening had gone exactly as planned. My father called 3 days later, as he said he would. We talked for an hour and 20 minutes. He told me things I had not known, that my grandfather's watch had been quietly moved to Danielle's closet 2 Christmases ago under the reasoning that she would appreciate it more. That certain investment accounts my grandparents had set up for both of us equally had been restructured over the years with my mother's guidance, and that the restructuring had not been equal. He told me these things in the same steady voice he had used on the deck, not performing an apology, just stating facts and letting me respond to them. I got angry. Sitting at my kitchen table on a Thursday afternoon while Eli was at school, I got genuinely angry in a way I hadn't let myself in years, and my father let me. He didn't manage it. He didn't tell me to look at Danielle's perspective or remind me she was going through a lot. He just let me say the things I had been folding up small and storing in places I pretended not to know about. When I was finished, he said, "That's all fair. I know that." And something that had been holding a specific shape inside me for a long time shifted. 6 weeks later, a small package arrived in the mail, brown paper wrapping with my name in my father's handwriting. Inside was a watch, heavy and silver and old in a way that meant it had been worn and wound and lived with for decades. No note. Just the watch, and the small leather case my grandfather had kept it in, and a tiny photograph tucked into the lid that I had never seen before. My grandfather and me at a picnic table, me maybe 4 years old, both of us looking at something outside the frame and laughing. I sat at the kitchen table and held the watch for a long time. Then I set it on the windowsill where the light came in and looked at it from across the room. Eli came home from school and dropped his backpack by the door, despite being told approximately 400 times not to drop his backpack by the door. He came into the kitchen for his after-school snack and noticed the watch immediately, because he noticed things. "Is that old?" he asked. "Very old," I said. "It was your great-grandfather's." He came closer and looked at it with great seriousness. The way he had looked at the cornhole board before his first toss, gauging the weight and importance of a thing. He reached out and touched the face very carefully with one finger, then pulled his hand back. "It's cool," he said, which from an 8-year-old is not a small thing. "It is," I said. "Can I wear it someday?" "When your wrist is big enough," I said. "Yes." He nodded, satisfied. He picked up his snack and wandered toward the living room. At the doorway, he stopped. "Mom," he said. "Yeah?" "I've been thinking," he said with the particular gravity he reserved for thoughts he'd been sitting on, "about Grandpa's party." I looked at him. "What about it?" "I think Grandpa wanted me to cut the cake the whole time," he said. "Like, he never forgot. He was just waiting for the right moment." I held that for a second. "I think you're right," I said. "I know," he said simply. And then he went to watch whatever he watched at 4 o'clock on a Thursday, and I turned back to the window and the watch and the photograph of my grandfather laughing at something I would never know, and I felt something that wasn't triumph exactly and wasn't closure exactly, but was something steadier than either of those things. Danielle texted me 7 weeks after the party. She took 3 days to compose it, you could tell, because it had the uneven texture of something that had been written and deleted and written again. She said she had been talking to a therapist. She said she had been thinking about patterns she hadn't wanted to look at before. She said she wasn't asking me to pretend the party didn't happen, or any of the other things that happened before it, but she wanted me to know she was trying to understand herself better, and she thought I deserved to hear that from her directly. It was not a perfect text. It left out specific things that probably should have been in it, but it was real in a way I hadn't expected from her, and I sat with it for 5 days before I responded. When I did, I kept it short. I said I appreciated her sending it. I said I wasn't ready to go back to the way things were, but I didn't think that version of us had ever actually worked anyway, so maybe that wasn't the goal. I said if she was genuinely doing the work, I was willing, eventually, to see what something new might look like. She responded, "That's more than I deserve right now. Thank you." I didn't know what any of it would become. I still don't. There are versions of a future I can imagine, and versions I can't yet. The world, I have learned, does not sort itself into the shapes we expect, and the people in it surprise you in both directions. What I know is that my father calls every Sunday now. He and Eli have a standing argument about whether the Cubs or the White Sox is the correct answer, which my father maintains is not a real debate, and Eli maintains absolutely is. He came to Eli's school science fair in February and stood in front of a poster about the life cycle of mealworms for 20 minutes asking questions with what appeared to be genuine investment. Eli told me afterward that Grandpa was the only adult who actually wanted to know the answers. The watch lives on my dresser now, on a small wooden tray I bought at a farmer's market. On mornings when I have time, I put it on, just to put it on, not for any occasion, just because it's mine, and it fits, and it carries something I want to carry with me on ordinary Tuesdays. The photograph from the case is tucked into the corner of my mirror, my grandfather and me at that picnic table, both of us turned towards something bright, both of us laughing at something neither of us can explain. Daniel, for the record, said to me on the night of the party, driving home with Eli asleep in the back seat, that he had been wanting to say something about my family for 3 years and had been waiting for me to be ready to hear it. I told him I thought I was probably ready now. He said, "You have always deserved more than they gave you." I looked out the window at the highway lights and said, "I know," and I meant it in a way I hadn't been able to mean it before. That, maybe, was the thing that took the longest to get to. Not the watch, not the apology. Not even my father standing in front of the whole room and putting the cake knife in my son's hand like a quiet, undeniable statement. The thing that took the longest was just being able to say to myself, in the dark of a moving car on a Sunday night, "I know," and let it be true.